Over the weekend, video of Itamar Ben Gvir, an extremist minister in the Israeli government, emerged showing him threatening by far the most popular Palestinian politician in the territories, Marwan Barghouti. If we can roll this VO here, Ben Gvir visits Barghouti in his cell after there had not been an image published of Barghouti in many years, and he says to him here, you will not win. He who messes with the people of Israel, he who will murder our children, he who will murder our women, we will wipe them out. You need to know this throughout history. Joining us to talk about the fallout from this is his son, Arab Barghouti. Arab joins us now. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
So I said at the top of the show that people often say of your father, they'll say, you'll often hear the defenders of Israel saying the problem with the Palestinians is, there's no Nelson Mandela. There's no leader who's going to unify the Palestinians and take them to a place of dignity and national liberation. And what a lot of people often say in response is that's not true. If there is one, his name's Marwan Barghouti, and he's been in prison for nearly 2 decades now. Can you tell us a little bit about who your father is for people who are not immediately familiar with the politics of the Palestinian territories?
Yeah, I think that the most important thing for people to understand is that Marwan Barghouti is the most popular leader in Palestine for a reason. It's for what he's given to the cause. My father has been struggling for Palestinians' rights for more than 50 years. It was exactly 50 years ago when he stood as a teenager in Israeli prisons at the age of 15. And that was the first, activism work for him. And after that, he spent overall 30 years in prison, 7 years in exile. And yet you will never hear him speak out of hatred. He has a purpose in his life, and this purpose is very simple: the freedom and living with dignity for all Palestinians. And it's very important for people to understand that my father supports political solutions. He supported the Oslo Accords in the 90s until he understood by the end of the 90s that we are dealing with a government, an Israeli government that is not interested in a peaceful solution, that is not interested in a two-state solution. It's only interested in supremacy of the Israeli state over the whole land. And the proof of that is that within the Oslo Accords, there were around 200,000 Israeli settlers in the West Bank, illegal settlers by the international law, by the US government, and by every government in the international community. Yet the number of settlers, instead of decreasing, it doubled by the end of the 90s within a few years. And that was a clear proof. With that, the Palestinian people had the right to go for the uprising, what's known as the Second Intifada. And my father was the face of that Intifada because he's a politician. And as a politician and as a parliament member, his role was to tell the people what to do. And he asked the people to protest against the illegal Israeli occupation that is not ending. And for that, he paid a steep price. They tried to assassinate him multiple times. And then they put him in prison. And they framed him as, a terrorist, which is the easiest thing for the Israelis to call anyone a terrorist, which is something that all colonial power used to delegitimize the right of people of defending themselves. And since 2002, he's been in prison for that.
Right, and I think one thing that's so kind of instructive about his life story is that he's a member of Fatah, which is the rival, the almost existential rival sometimes of Hamas, and he has been a very public and vocal supporter of a two-state solution, whereas Hamas has not publicly supportive of the two-state solution. Yet, among Hamas, he appears to be not just the Palestinians generally, but even people within Hamas. He's the most popular politician. They've talked repeatedly about trying to get him released from prison as one of their top, if not their top priority. So what do you make of what does that tell you about where the politics are? That if Hamas is this supportive of somebody who is supportive of a two-state solution and has called for nonviolent, a kind of civil society-led, unified Palestinian resistance.
I think it tells me that the Palestinian people are in need and are really interested in having a peaceful solution. Everyone is always wondering if the Palestinian people want peace. Of course, we want peace. If you look at the human suffering, more than 90% of the human suffering that is happening in this land for the past 76 years is from the Palestinian side. I know that, in US media, it's always covered as if the Israelis are the only ones who are suffering. Everyone lost their minds on whenever there is an Israeli that is suffering, and we don't want that. My father, as you mentioned, has been very clear about his opposing to the targeting of civilians. If you look at his biggest political achievement, it's the political prisoners document. The prisoners document in 2006 was a historical document for multiple reasons. First of all, it gathered for the first time all Palestinian factions under one umbrella, and they signed the first ever document together that stated that the Palestinian state should be established on the 67 borders. The targeting of civilians is forbidden. The targeting of anyone outside of the 67 borders is forbidden as well. And he brought not even only the Fatah and the PLO's parties. He also brought Hamas, Islamic Jihad, and all Palestinian factions who signed on that document. And I think that's a huge achievement. But unfortunately, after that, and it was the cornerstone for the Palestinian government back then. But after that, unfortunately, the international community missed the opportunity when Hamas won the elections. And instead of helping Hamas to become a political party, they isolated Hamas. They stopped the funding for the PA until the PA collapsed, and which caused the division within Palestine. We've been divided between Fatah and Hamas for the last 17 years. And it's between the West Bank and Gaza as well. And that was exactly the vision that Netanyahu always bragged about to the Israeli people, that look what I did. I divided them. I ended the two-state solution. I did this and that. And unfortunately, he's always respected within the American politics, even though he is the reason why we are suffering right now. Not only Palestinians, but I could argue if you're an Israeli, you should be opposing to the Netanyahu government, and the faces of Ben Gvir and Smotrich are a pure reflection of where the Israeli politics is headed.
And on that note about Ben Gvir, I want to read this quote from one of your father's lawyers to NPR. He said, "When I received the video, really, I didn't recognize Marwan. He lost a lot of weight, and even his face is not what we were used to seeing." He said he had to consult with your father's wife to confirm that the gaunt figure in the video was her imprisoned husband. That's according to NPR. What was your reaction to seeing that video?
I was shocked. To say the least. I thought that there is a ceiling towards the desperation and the ugliness of this Israeli government, but I think that they have no ceiling. I think that they are capable of breaking laws and breaking traditions in front of the whole world because they know that there is no accountability whatsoever for what they do. If we were in a just world, it would have been the opposite. Ben Gvir is the one who needs to be in prison because he's a convicted terrorist. He's someone who is calling for the genocide of the Palestinian people, and yet he practices his freedom when he comes to the US, which is shameful that someone like him is allowed to go to the US, but Palestinian children are now not allowed to go to the US, which tells you a lot about what we have to deal with. I think it's the video is shocking because I haven't seen my father in 3 years. It's very important for people to understand that this is a man who is politician, a respected politician. He's recognized nationally and internationally. He was nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize for his attempts and tries to bring people together, to unify the Palestinian people into one political vision that is accepted by the international community. And this point might be the reason why Netanyahu and his government are being very stubborn towards his release, because they know that someone like him who respects the international community, respects international law, is calling for the two-state solution, presents a threat way more than extremists, because extremists, they make it easy for him to cancel the Palestinian story overall. I think it's shameful that someone like him, who holds a PhD in political science, who is an educator, he is a great father, and yet he is being treated like that. After October 7th, my father was sent to solitary confinement. He was assaulted at least 3 times, end of 23, March of 24, and September of 2024. The one in September of 2024 was the major one, where 3 to 4 prison guards, they came to him, they dragged him into an area with no camera surveillance. They started beating him up until he passed out. He was bleeding on the floor for hours, and he got injured in his ear, in his forehead, in his right arm, and he got some of his ribs broken. And this is the treatment that we are talking about. I want to make sure that people understand that my father does not represent himself only. He represents 10,000 Palestinian political prisoners who are going through the same treatment. We lost 76 Palestinian prisoners have been killed inside prison since October 7th. Many of them because of starvation, many of them because of beatings, many of them because of being left without any medical treatment. And no one talks about it. Everyone lost their minds because of the scenes of an Israeli captive in Gaza a month ago who looked losing weight and didn't look healthy. We want the same energy from everyone when they see Palestinians. It's time to humanize Palestinians and to stop the double standards.
Yeah. Yep. So interestingly, while Hamas has been, publicly, pushing for the release of your father, some of his people that you would suspect ought to be his allies in the PA have been much less vocal, to put it gently, about his release. Like it seems like Netanyahu is not the only one threatened by his potential release, that there are rivals inside the PA that may be as well. You saw some of them condemning Ben Gvir for visiting, which they should, but at the same time, they haven't. What's your I don't want to put words in your mouth. What's your understanding of what the kind of role of some of the top officials in the PA has been in terms of securing his freedom?
Well, I think it's not a secret that the PA is not doing well overall. I think that the PA is in trouble because they don't have, unfortunately, we feel that they are being helpless because the genocide that is happening in Gaza is not only impacting the people of Gaza, but also in the West Bank as part of the collective punishment policy of the Israelis. And in the West Bank, we have, many people thousands of people who have been ethnically cleansed from their homes in the north, in Tulkarem, in Ain Shams, in Hebron, and in many other places. And we didn't see any reaction by the PA. In internal politics, you'll always have a competition, and it's very normal that some of them, they feel threatened. But I refuse to believe that any Palestinian, regardless who they are, don't want my father to be released. My father is a great political force for the Palestinian people. He represents a unifying figure that everyone respects, and he represents a great opportunity for the international community to rescue the two-state solution. And I think that the PA needs to be around that. He's a Fatah leader. He's he's a member of the Central Committee of Fatah, and he's a proud member there. And our generation, I think, are not big fans of how Fatah has become with the corruption and with many other issues and the integration with the PA. But I really believe that a strong PA. The body of the PA needs to be reformed, and the institutions need to be stronger. And people like my father and many others who are in prison as leaders can play a great role in doing so.
And last question for me. I'm sure a number of people watching at this point say, well, this sounds great. He opposes attacks on civilians. He supports a two-state solution. He's a unifying popular figure. But Israel says that he was responsible for killing civilians, and that's why he's in prison. Can you address that viewer?
Of course. I think, thank you for talking about this point, because this point is part of what we call the character assassination against Marwan Barghouti that has been practiced for the last 2 decades. If you go to the trial of my father, it was a kangaroo trial. If you go to the details, the judge of his trial called him a terrorist even before in the early stages of his trial, called him that he's someone who target civilians, which is something that is, of course, not true. If you go to the evidence, we have legal teams, international legal teams, who did a full analysis, and they concluded that it would be impossible to say that Marwan Barghouti has been given a fair trial. Marwan Barghouti they tried to assassinate him 3 separate times in 2001 before they brought him to prison. If you want to assassinate someone before you bring them to trial, that gives you the message that they are sending. The fear that was within the Israeli government, they didn't want an inspirational Palestinian leader that could give hope to the Palestinian people, that we have hope in having our own state. And their answer for that is, let's try to assassinate him. When they fail to assassinate him, let's put him in prison, and we can easily label him as a terrorist. And all the Western media, of course, who are puppets to the Israeli government, will start using the word terrorist whenever they mention his name. The word terrorist has been used to delegitimize, as I said, like people like us defending ourselves against oppression and against occupation and against the horrible Israeli actions within the Palestinian cause. The last thing I want to say, if you go back and study the history of the Israeli trial system, first of all, they have 2 laws. If you're Palestinian at 16, you're an adult. If you're an Israeli in the same West Bank, illegal settler, at 18, you're an adult. Other things is that they make kids, when they are 13 and 14, sign on Hebrew statements without understanding what they are, without having a lawyer, without having a guardian present. They put, as we speak right now, there are 3,600 Palestinian prisoners in Israeli prisons without trial, without charge, and they are there under administrative detention, which is illegal by international law. I mean, you're talking about a trial that has a conviction rate against Palestinians of 99.7%. So what credibility does that trial or court have on Palestinians? I think that people need to go need to see and review the trial that my father had. It's full of faults. It was intentional to fabricate that he targeted civilians so they can cancel his name forever, because they knew his influence within the Palestinian people.
I was going to say, I do have one final question, actually.
And last point on that, and then your question. Yeah, for people who are still confused about that, there were, at the time, Palestinian factions and leaders who supported attacks on civilians, but they were very public about it. This was an open debate inside the resistance. So the idea that you would do it but deny it is it's like, no, like the people who supported attacks on civilians were open about why they did it and what the purpose was and why it was justified, etc. And he was opposed to that camp. But anyway, go ahead.
Well, no, so I was actually going to ask about that debate right now. After, let's say there's a ceasefire, some type of negotiation, how optimistic or not optimistic are you that leaders like your father will rise out of the ashes of Gaza at this point? Because the desperation has to be on a completely different level right now in 2025. So what does the future look like?
I think that every Palestinian priority right now is stopping the genocide in Gaza. This is the main priority. This is the most important thing. And we don't want to distract people into looking at other issues. The second thing is, of course, I am positive that my father is going to be released. I don't know when. Of course, the negotiations are very complicated. But, you know, my father used to always tell me that hopelessness is a privilege that we Palestinians don't have. And I do think that we shouldn't feel hopeless because of what's happening. I want to remind everyone that, you know, if you look at the South African model, for example, in the 80s, within a few years, no one expected things to change that quickly. And I think that I see the change. I want to send a message to the pro-Palestinians around the world and the pro-justice. We shouldn't call them pro-Palestinians, they are pro-justice. And I want to send them a message that I know that things seem as if they're not moving in the right direction. I know that things seem as if they are depressing with what we hear from governments, from officials, from the Israeli government itself. But I think that we need to keep the pressure. We owe this to the Palestinian children that are being slaughtered. We don't want their blood to be for nothing. We want to end this by establishing a Palestinian independent state. And I really hope that we can celebrate with my father a free Palestine sooner than later. And maybe one day you can meet with him and see what a great human being he is. He's, you know, as I said, what I want people to understand about him is that he's a great father. He has six grandchildren that he's never met before. You know, I want him to fulfill the promise that he gave my mother more than 40 years ago when he told her that, listen, when he proposed to her, he told her that I'm not going to be a doctor or an engineer. I'm going to be a politician. And in Palestine, if you're a politician, you're either going to be killed, arrested, or become a corrupted leader, unfortunately. So he knew that his path was going to be very hard, but I promise you that when Palestine is free, we will live a normal life with our children, with our grandchildren. And that's the promise that we're all waiting for as a family. And he represents thousands of families who are going through the same in Palestine, and they don't get covered, unfortunately, in the media.
Well, we look forward to that day. Marwan Barghouti, thank you so much for joining us. Very much appreciate it.
Hey, if you like that video, hit the like button or leave a comment below. It really helps get the show to more people.
And if you'd like to get the full show ad-free and in your inbox every morning, you can sign up at breakingpoints.com.
That's right. Get the full show, help support the future of independent media at breakingpoints.com.